All right, let's talk about getting Xcode. And as a registered developer, I of course have Xcode 5 or 5X, whatever the latest version is, and I have that because I can access it from my development portal, Apple's website, and get the latest and greatest versions. Right now, the day that I'm recording this, we're about a week away from Apple lifting their NDA or non-disclosure agreement and allowing us developers to actually talk about Xcode 5 and iOS 7, all that stuff. So right now, if you were to go to the App Store, all you would see is this version 4.63. But when you're seeing this video, version 5 should be available because that NDA will have been lifted, and I'd assume that same day they're going to put Xcode 5 in the App Store. All right, so that's the version that you want. And I'm going to go ahead and open that up now because, of course, I already have it. And let's go over here to New Project. Here's what you'll be seeing on the first screen. It says choose a template for your project, and these are divided into iOS or OS 10. If you create a iOS application here, you can eventually target the Mac as well. So let's just start with iOS. And of course, here's the template that says Sprite Kit Game, and that's of course what we want. So let's click on Next, and the product name we'll just call some game. Your organization is, of course, that's just my company name, and then your company identifier is usually the reverse of your domain name, so com.CartoonSmart, and then what they do is they tack on for your bundle identifier, which is kind of Apple's internal ID for your game, just the product name with that part of it. And then for your class prefix, when you're creating your own classes and things like that, Apple prefers that you have your own initials in front of there. So in my case, I just put in CS. You can put in your own initials, whatever you want. And then for devices, I'm just going to target iPad here. I won't worry about the iPhone for right now. But no, if you did want to target a universal device, just pull that down to universal. So then it would be making a game for both the iPad or the iPhone. Click on Next and just save this out wherever you want. And it might take a sec to load up here. All right, if you are familiar with Xcode development, meaning you've made anything in the past or pretty much learned anything about Xcode development before, you can go ahead and skip to the next video, because what I'm going to do is spend some time just talking about the general interface in Xcode, and this will have nothing to do with Sprite Kit, so you're going to be incredibly bored for about 10 to 15 minutes. All right, so if you haven't left the video, that means that you've never used Xcode before or done any iOS development. So it's time to talk about just all the generalities here. And what you're looking at is, as you can see, it's the general screen for setting up your app. And if you ever kind of lose track of where that is, you can always go back over here to some game or just the title of it, and you'll see this same screen again. So here's that bundle identifier that we just talked about, and your version is going to be kind of Apple's tracking version for this as well. All right, so your first game is going to be version 1.0, and then people typically go up in increments of 0.1 after that. So it's important because when you go and you submit your game to Apple, and when you start setting up kind of your metadata for it in iTunes Connect as a registered developer, you're going to tell them what that version number is for the most recent version. And if that doesn't match what you exported out as an app here, you're going to get an issue. Okay, so if you tell them it's going to be 1.4, you better set this to be 1.4 here as well. Your build is kind of your own ID for this. So, you know, you might just go, I'm up to 56 now, 57, 58. Doesn't matter in terms of anything else. Okay, and then your team is well, look, there's my team, CartoonSmart LLC. So there we go. I kind of wiped out everything here, so I was already back to no team. This refers to my my registered development account. And we'll talk more about that in a separate video, because it does get into a lot of different things that I think are very, very unnecessary if you don't plan on being a registered developer for a while. In which case, you can still enjoy these tutorials but you're gonna be limited to testing with the simulator, which is okay. But there comes a time when you're gonna want to test on your own device, especially if you're doing anything with the accelerometer or something like that, and very especially if you ever want to sell your app. You're gonna need to get that registered developer account, and it is $99 a year, and that will mean that you're gonna also install some provisioning profiles. And just really quickly, you have two main profiles: your development profile and your distribution profile. Those are generally they're on a per app basis. So I would have a profile for some game, and the development one allows me to install that onto my device, and then I can select this, my device name, which should be showing up in there, and I would be able to build the app to that device. That's how Apple does it, okay? Even though you might be creating a .app file, all right, you can't just take that .app file and dump it into iTunes Connect or email it to yourself and then open it up on your iPhone or iPad. That's not how it works, okay? It's kind of that little security thing, right? And then so that's your developer profile, and then for your distribution one, you get that profile to basically sign your application, and it ties it to you, all right? It ties it to your own little world here, and then you're saying, all right, this is the app that I made. I'm sending it off to Apple, and they'll put it in the store with that signed profile. Okay. All right, so that's all we're going to talk about that for right now. Your deployment info, you're kind of stuck in 7.0 if you're using SpriteKit. All right, what's that mean? Well, it means that you can't step this down to another version, but more importantly, it means that you exclude iPad 1 users, because they can't ever go up to 7.0. In fact, they were stuck at 5.1. They couldn't have gone up to iOS 6 either. So if your device is an iPad 1, you might want to consider buying a new one before testing with SpriteKit. And for as many people out there that are buying apps with an iPad 1, there's probably as many out there that are just as interested in the latest and greatest apps that were made with, for 7.0 or whatever. So, you lose some people and you gain some other people. Then devices, this is set to iPad. I remember I had that option a moment ago for Universal or iPhone. You can change that at any time. And then your main interface, you don't have to worry about that. You do need to consider your device orientation. I tend to just go with one or the other, at least in terms of games. It gets to be kind of just crazy if you plan on supporting every direction, because, well, just think about, imagine if you turned Mario Brothers on its side or something midway through the play. You're gonna have to account for that. So I say just figure it out early on and choose one or the other, because I'm testing in I'm screen recording in this area that is landscape. I'll go with landscape over here so things don't get cut off. All right, if you are new to Xcode development, you're in for a little bit of a treat. This is not how app icons and launch icons were done in the pre-Xcode 5 world, and this is much nicer. What you do is you drag your icons into these little empty slots, and they get saved inside of this folder, this Xcode assets or image assets folder. And this part is very similar to how it was done before for both launch images and app icons. But get this, folks, if you decide to watch this and you did have some history with development, all your images can be put in through here. All right, so I could dump in, I don't know, let me just find any old image on my desktop here. What's this one? All right. Oh. Fifth time's the charm. All right, well, that was the wrong image type. That's why I was having a problem. But, yeah, I could just throw that in here and then name it whatever I want in this little slot. And then it doesn't matter what the names are of the files that I put in here, right? Here, I'll just do this. So let's call this character. This probably would have been smarter to do from the start. character, and then I can dump in those files for both the regular non-HD devices, which are kind of fallen by the wayside, and the HD or the Retina display enabled devices. So those have double the resolution, so that's where the 2x is coming from. And I guess now that you think about it, if it's an iOS 7 app, it would only be the iPad 2 that these 1x or these regular resolution images come into play. So anyway, I hadn't thought about that yet. So yeah, that's much nicer, especially compared to what we were doing before. And let's get back over here to our main screen and just continue on. We've got linked frameworks and libraries, and for an introduction video to Xcode, I don't think we really need to talk much about that, but this is also found over here in your build phases. Previously, in other earlier versions of Xcode, you didn't have that right over here, but I think it is good to be kind of in the forefront, because you can add extra functionality to your app that's not that doesn't come with it right away. I guess it just makes it more trimmed down application without all those extra frameworks in there. And if at any time you do need to add one in, for example, if we were going to use the accelerometer, we need to add in the core motion framework. Oh, there it is, the core motion framework, and you just click on this and you go over here to add. Not going to worry about that for right now. Okay, so just in terms of the, I guess, the general user interface, what do we got here? Well, you can click these to go get rid of that stuff. You can click over here to get rid of this stuff. You can click in the middle, and this is going to give you mostly your debug options, your output. And if we were over here in our class file writing code and things like that, and we wanted to send a message to the output window, we would write a line of code that does exactly that, and we'll do a lot of that later on. But by default, if you had sent a message down there via code, this is just going to pop up automatically. But after doing that, if you thought, hey, wait a minute, this is taking up prime real estate for code, just click over here to get rid of that window. And then other things, let's see. Well, over here, if you were to select or just, kind of press in between any of the characters making up this this class name, you're going to get some quick help advice as to what that class does and where to find more information about it. And one thing I'd like to do in this tutorial series is kind of go back and forth between what I'm teaching and showing you guys Apple's own documentation on it, because that's very helpful, because I can't teach everything, but if you know how to go find out more about something, that's very helpful. And Apple's guides can be a little bit, I think, confusing for new beginners to just code in general. So I'll try to help demystify those. And then all these little buttons and things like that, this UI kit stuff, it looks really easy to use and all that stuff, and I'm sure it is, but you know what? We're not going to be playing with those, because we're going to be writing everything, we're going to be coding everything from scratch. And don't think that I'm just being a purist here, but that's kind of what SpriteKit is about. We're not relying on storyboards or UI kit things. We're just going to be in the SpriteKit world and kind of setting our own style for everything, for the gameplay, for the buttons, for the images, and things like that. So even though this is an iOS 7 tutorial, we're not bringing along with us the baggage of creating a iOS 7 designed game, right? Okay, we don't need to stick to some thin linear lines and stuff like that, or some flat artwork. We can do whatever we want. Okay, it's our game. And there's a lot of emphasis on this new design with iOS 7, but the game people out there are, those of us that are making games, we're just going to stick with our own style. All right, what else can we talk about? Well, we've got this big play button over here, which if I set this down to the iPad simulator, right, iOS simulator iPad or the iPad Retina, I can build a test game to that, and you should see that pop up in just a moment. Here it is. Because I set this to landscape orientation, it should flip to the left or right in a moment. Once it there we go. And it says hello world over here, because that's the just template code that is running. We're going to wipe that out in the next video. But there it is, and then the simulator is pretty bare bones. There's not that much to it. You can change the scale. You can go over here to hardware, and you can rotate it left or right. You can do a little shake gesture. You can switch out the device, and importantly, you can go over here to home. And if you ever need to, you can wiggle this icon to death, like you would on any of your actual devices. Of course, you'll end up crashing the app at that point because you get rid of it. But that's occasionally useful if you just thought you were getting haunted by ghosts that were leaving images in the simulator that you'd already replaced, and for some reason you were still seeing them. That's something that you might need to do. You can also go over here to Product and then hold down the Option key. You'll notice how these change a little bit. You can then go to Clean Build folder, and that's just going to basically wipe out any existence of a past built app. Okay, and I have seen kind of strange things happen with caching of images and stuff like that. So there might be a day that you need to do it. Just remember, hold down that Option key too. All right, I think we are done with our general user interface tour, so let's move on to something else.